Hello, everyone. Today we talk with Marcus Matthews, mind mentor from UK. And the reason why he is here is because 2018 he hit the rock bottom and then he changed everything. He changed his whole life. And today he's helping others. Marcus, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I think this is a really important conversation for us to have today. Um, I think just before we pressed record on this, I was just saying about I think it's so important from a male perspective to start to see kind of therapy, coaching, mentoring in a completely different way. It's Can I give you a statistic? This is a really interesting statistic to start with.
Yes, please.
So
UK or UK
Well,
statistic or
it's this is UK, but it's pretty general. And actually, it's even backed up with marketing statistics.
hmm,
So when we look at well-being generally, engagement in well-being is about 80% female and 20% male. Okay, that's the engagement. Now, when you look at engagement on things like social media, it's exactly the same. But what's also interesting is that the figures I think have gone up now, but it's 76% of suicides are male. Now, you're telling me that there's no correlation there. And from my own experience back in 2018, um, my own personal kind of journey and to what I do now has led to back that statistic up 100%. And here's the thing, it also backs everything else that my clients have said. And here's another statistic from the NHS in the UK, right? When it comes to talking
uh,
therapies.
Marcus,
Yeah.
could you please explain NHS for
Yeah.
German
So
people?
the National Health Service in the
Thank you.
UK, which is where the majority of people in the UK are told to go and get help. It's it is free on the point of access. You obviously pay for it through taxes and stuff like that. But the National Health Service's own statistics, and you can go and search this, actually says that talking therapies um, are less than 50% successful. Now, what's even more interesting is when you start to look at this from a neuroscience perspective, this makes complete sense. Because when we go into trauma, when we're in that dark place, the part of our brain, the dorsal prefrontal cortex, which is our kind of higher brain function, it allows us to communicate, do complex maths and all of that sort of stuff, right? That shuts down. It's not required when we're in fight or flight mode. And so it would make sense that if you are in the depths of trauma, certainly if you're feeling suicidal, that cognition is not running the show. And again, when we look into this, you don't think suicidal, you don't think anxious, you feel it. And so, from my own experience, so what basically happened was back in 2016, I was working as a police officer in the UK. I ended up getting assaulted, and the assault actually wasn't the thing that was the issue, even though everybody told me it was. And I think that was the first frustration. I could kind of comprehend that that wasn't the issue. The issue was that when I needed help and support, the help and support and the people I trusted weren't there. And from the work I actually did, again, that was backed up.
You didn't get the support.
I didn't get the support. So I lost trust. And because I lost trust with people, then I was isolated. So when we
Hmm.
think about this, I'll give you a quick analogy. This is quite a funny one. A few years ago, friends of ours, their parents live in Uganda, in Africa. And
Yeah.
we were on the Nile, and there was a really weird kind of scene. So there's some water buffalo to the left hand side, a big group of water buffalo, and then there was a single male on his own, and then a load of crocodile. And Sherry Grant's mum said he'll be dead by morning, and I thought that was quite oh, okay. I said, why is that? She said he's probably done something that separated him from the herd, and because he's been separated from the herd, the crocodiles will see him off because he doesn't have the herd to protect him. So a lot of the times when it comes to feeling down and feeling isolated, um, it's because we feel separated from the crowd. Now, when we look at this from a tribal perspective, if we go back, 10,000 years ago when we were living on the savannas of Africa or we were living in forests, men would tend to go out into small hunting groups, but they would be very individualistic in the way that they work. Whereas women would kind of tend to gather together. They would talk about their problems, and it was all to do with survival. Men are generally stronger. Men are generally, brought up to be that lone wolf. Nature shows it, right? You look at any of the animal species. Often, the cubs will stay with mum, and the females will stay like in the pride, but the males are ejected and pushed out. So, so literally what's happening when we start to look at things like anxiety, suicide, men really need purpose. Men can pretty much push through anything that's painful as long as they have an objective and a purpose. And the
Mm.
world has basically told men, we don't need you anymore. You're not important anymore. And that's literally what happened over a period of years from probably the age of 16 where, for example, when I was in the police, I'd done my sergeant's exams. I was looking to get promoted, and a woman got put in place. Now she hadn't done any of her exams, she'd not done any of her board, but they were told that we need to have more female sergeants. And so one of the things that I'm very,
It's
very
pretty difficult situation.
yeah, yeah, because we focus a lot on equality rather than equity. And
Yeah.
that's the big distinction is that, it's not surprising that those figures are there because a lot of the male spaces now have been eradicated.
You
There are
mean
not
you
that
mean
many safe spaces.
the figures regarding
Yeah, yeah,
suicide?
yeah, 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 because if a man doesn't feel as though he has any purpose, then what's the point in being here? And actually, when we look at this historically, if we look at elephants, for example, when elephants are looking to die, they will leave the herd and go to the elephant graveyard. Lions do the same. I think chimps do the same as well. They never tend to die in the tribe, they tend to move away from the tribe to die. But here's the interesting thing. This is the interesting thing, looking at this from my police perspective, but also from doing my own healing and working with my own clients, is I think we've got suicide wrong. So in the police, whenever I investigated suicides, one of the things that was really interesting, there was only ever two types of suicide. One was somebody who was going through mania. So they'd literally lost their mind. And most of those suicides were accidental suicides. They were a cry for
Okay.
help, but they ended up dying. The ones that were planned suicides, what was always interesting was probably a week before they took their life, everybody else thought they were in a great place. They seemed to have turned their life around. And what had come out from that from my perspective, when I started to look at it and notice this pattern, was that men had made the decision that it was in the best interest of everybody and they were happy with that decision. But here's the twist. The twist is, from what I've understood through my own journey of being suicidal in 2018, was that it wasn't about killing the physical, it was about killing the the person that you become because that wasn't you. So although yes, I am a hypnotherapist, I actually say I'm a de-hypnotherapist, really, because
Yeah.
what I'm doing is that we have been programmed, and you know this yourself, we've been programmed over time to believe something that isn't true. And so our thoughts, our feelings, all of those things that we deem as being negative are a perception. And once we understand why those feelings are there, once we get to the root cause, and that was my question, on paper, logically, everything was great. I had a great job, I had a great wife, kids, family, etc., etc. It made no sense. And so the question that I wanted to ask was, why do I feel the way that I do? And that's basically what I do now, is to help clients on whatever it is that they're struggling with. Why is it that I feel the way that I do? Because why would the mind and body create something to destroy us? Evolutionarily, that makes zero sense.
But what you are saying is that people aren't themselves.
Yeah,
They don't feel who they are.
because they've changed who they are to fit in with the crowd, to fit in with the
Yeah.
narrative, to fit in what the world says they should be.
May I ask you, your children,
Mm.
2018, how old were your children?
Oh, right. I've got to do some maths now. So Harry's 20. So what was that? 6 years ago. So Harry's 23. So yeah. So he would have been a late teenager. Alex is 17. So he would have been about 11. So they would have been kind of middle teenage years,
Oh yeah,
which
okay.
which is pretty which is pretty important. That's really when dads come into their own, right? When boys go from kind of 11, that's when testosterone starts to fire up and they need their dad there, you know?
Yeah,
And I will admit, I mean, the biggest shame that I feel is the way I probably acted in that time. Like they would do the littlest of things and I would just lose it. This was before I had the proper breakdown, but look
please,
in
please,
retrospect.
please explain it. What?
Yeah, so lose it.
What do you
So
mean by
so
that?
so just a little thing, like I don't know, I just get really angry at the
Yeah,
littlest of things because I was masking, I was trying to keep everything together because as the dad, as the husband, as the I
yeah,
was the protector and the provider, and on the outside, I was having to pretend to do that, whilst on the inside, I was breaking down. But this is the thing, you don't realize it's these little
the
things that
steps.
stack over
Yeah,
time until you actually break.
yeah. But do you mean there was some kind of high level or aggressivity or being angry all the time?
Yeah, yeah. I think most men will probably agree is all they really ever want is peace. and and so I'm very much a giving person.
Yeah,
And I think half of the problem was I used to work twice as hard as anybody else. I was somebody who would push the boundaries, somebody who was always constantly trying to help others. And I think that that's what broke me more than anything was that at the moment that I went to say, hey, I'm not feeling great, what I got was a label. I got have some drugs, and I was completely dismissed. It was as though I was thrown on the garbage heap. It was like, here's your label. You didn't make it through. You're broken, and I didn't want to accept that.
yeah,
It was. I think having the courage and the vulnerability to say I'm not in a great place, but
yeah.
then somebody giving you a label telling you that there's a problem.
But
And
it's
so,
it's it's
yeah,
great rejection from the society.
absolutely. Yeah. Which is why I always use that buffalo analogy, right? Because it's the same thing. I
Yeah,
became the buffalo, which meant that I had no purpose. So I just became food for other people. I just, it's, and this is when we start to spiral into things like addiction, because we now know there's lots of studies around this, is that addiction is a lack of connection. So this is why you, it can be drinking alcohol, it can be taking drugs, and
whatever.
even though a lot of my clients are female that I work with, interestingly, of the men that I work with, there tends to be some sort of addiction, whether that be alcohol, drugs, porn, something like that, that has been linked to the way they feel because they're desperate for connection.
Yeah, but it's quite difficult to explain because most of the men I know, they don't really talk about the feelings. And
Yes.
as far as I understand you, it was the feeling. The feeling pushed you to do some really strange, odd things.
Yeah, it was, but what was very interesting is I didn't want to talk about my feelings. It's a real kind of nuance, right? So
Yeah,
it's it. I didn't want to talk about my feelings. I wanted to release it. And
Hmm. Understandable.
there's a big difference. So when we look at therapy, when we look at generally how somebody, say you go to a psychologist, um, they will tend to use models and theories and then put a label on it to explain that process. And the phrase that's often used is, we help you to cope and manage. Now, if you broke your leg and went to your doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, your leg's broken.
Yeah.
Here's a crutch. Use the crutch for the rest of your life, drugs, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and cope and manage." Would we accept that?
No,
No,
not here. Not here. Not
we
in the
wouldn't
UK,
accept
not
it.
in Germany, not in Europe.
No, we wouldn't. But we accept that when it comes to if our mind's broken. But what's really interesting is, if you look at that as an analogy, when when you fix a broken leg, the surgeon or the doctor doesn't fix the broken leg. The surgeon or the doctor fixes the environment in which the bone heals.
Yeah.
And so what we need to look at is, and this is part of my four pillars that I work with when I work with clients, is the first thing is that it doesn't matter what strategies and what things you put on top. And if the environment to heal isn't right, then you're not going to heal. You've got to create, and that comes from inside. You've got to understand what's going on in the inside, the emotions, where they are. We need to be able to release all of that toxic energy that's in our body. Um,
Yeah.
and what's as we know, Marissa Peer says, words are powerful and your mind is listening. So can I share this, because this is really powerful, that I found.
Yes, please.
Um, I'll get you to try it actually. If you just close your eyes, I'm just going to
Yeah.
give you two words, and I just want you to notice the difference. So you go to the doctors, you're feeling all kind of the way you are, da 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 da. Okay, I want you to say, "I feel anxious,"
I feel anxious.
and notice how you feel that in your body. Now, I want you to just hold that feeling, but I want you to replace the phrase with this: "I just care."
I just care.
Are you anxious, or do you just care?
Both?
But you know what I'm saying there. But the driver actually is I care, and maybe I can't serve. I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
But anxiety now has become like Google and Uber. We kind of just apply it to any uncomfortable feeling, and we treat the result of I just care, but I'm unable to serve. Therefore, I
Yeah.
feel anxious. So so what we need to do is we need to be able to create an environment where we can actually provide. We can do that bit. Can I share a story with you? Because this is something that's really
Could you please,
powerful.
before
Yeah,
the story comes, could you please explain what you mean by the environment? From my perspective as father, there is, and I have, for example, 10-year-old child. The environment. So if I send my daughter, my child to the therapy, the environment is always the home. Do you mean that environment, external environment, or you mean inside?
there's both. However, if you can't control the external, which you can't control other people, but you can control the internal environment. A bit like what I've just done there. So if we look at this from an internal environment, I did this with a client yesterday. I do something called a power hour, and this client came to work with me, and I integrate breath work with a lot of the stuff that I do.
Mm,
What we're actually wanting to do is, when we're going through any sort of what we would deem as negative thought patterns, we need to
yeah.
interrupt them. And the only way we can interrupt them is to go from our fight flight mode, the sympathetic nervous system, to the
Mm,
parasympathetic nervous system, rest or digest. So for us to heal, we have to be in the parasympathetic. This is why hypnosis is so powerful, because you can't go into a state of hypnosis without being in the parasympathetic. Like
Yeah.
you can't do it. It's like driving a car and trying to change the wheel at the same time. You have to pull over, right? So
Yeah.
so so using if we use the breath, so this is why breath work, again, a lot of people go, breath work, it's amazing, but they don't know why. Okay.
Mm.
So when we breathe deeply and intentionally, just focusing on the breath, on that point on the breath, it is impossible for your brain to fire cortisol, which is our stress hormone. It is impossible, right?
No.
That's why if you were in the in Africa and a lion was running at you, you wouldn't go, right? You just wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
So it's it's all about doing little things every day, like going to the gym. If you want to go, if you want to stay strong, it's about doing consistent practice every day that builds. So
Yeah.
it's the same with the mind. We tend to wait until we're broken until we do something, but we want a quick fix. So it's all about understanding how the mind actually works and how we utilize a negative situation. So I'll give you an example. I've got a very simple hack that moves you from stress to rest. Takes 30 seconds. Can I share that with you?
Please.
Okay, so the mind's job is to keep you safe. That's predominantly that's all it's there for. And it
Yeah.
keeps you safe based on prediction.
Mm.
But the first thing you need to do is to break the habit loop because if your mind is saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over, right? It doesn't matter how many times you say, I am enough, I am amazing, I am fantastic, because there's a part of your brain that goes, no, you're
Yeah.
not. Okay, so I started saying, well, how do we build a bridge to get to that place?
Mm-hmm.
If I can't, how do we build a bridge? So I thought, well, the first thing we need to do is to tell the mind it's safe and that where you are presently is okay. Because what's actually happening is your body is trying to signal to you, like a warning light on a car, that there's something wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you just close your eyes, I'll just share this with you. And just what I want you to do is, as you say these words, I want you to notice how your body feels as we do it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just close your eyes, all I want you to do is to do this. I want you to say, I want you to think of a word, think of something that might make you a little bit or anxious, or like a negative emotion, whatever it is. And I just want you to
Mm-hmm.
say this. Focus on the feeling and say these words. I'm completely safe.
I'm completely safe.
My mind and my body is just trying to help me,
My mind and my body try to help me.
and that's okay.
And that's okay.
Now, did you notice as you kind of paused as you heard those words and let them resonate and hit your body, you took a deep breath?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was literally happening? You were signaling to your physiology, it's okay to breathe, it's okay to move over, right? But what
Mm-hmm.
does the world tell us? It tells us, oh, it's not okay to feel like that. You need to
Yeah.
do something about it. But actually, was that in that moment, was that true? And let me quote Einstein here. Like, let's bring some physics into this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
We
bring
like him very
Einstein
much
in.
in Germany.
Let's bring Einstein in. Right. So Albert Einstein said, the general theory of relativity: the bigger the mass of the object, the more it experiences time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, what is the mass of your mind?
Zero.
Zero, right? So it's a wave. It
Yeah.
passes through mass, but it doesn't have any mass itself.
Kind
So
of energy.
yeah, it's just energy. So if the mind has no mass, therefore it doesn't experience time. Therefore, as far as the mind is concerned, it only knows the present moment. Now, we can start to then talk about quantum mechanics and quantum physics and all the rest of it. But actually, that's a scientific fact that the mind has no mass. So when you go through an experience and something changes in your environment, you're not just seeing that environment with the knowledge that you have as an adult, you're seeing it as a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old. Maybe you're even seeing it through, lines of ancestry and energy, and if you want to go down the woo-woo side, but
Yeah.
physics is showing us this. So what we need to do is that if you imagine there's 1,000 versions of you that are crying out trying to give you the answer, you need to be able to. It's like having children, right?
Yeah.
We're walking through the store. It's a Saturday morning, and we're really busy. We've got a busy day. We need to get the groceries and get out.
Yeah.
And they always put the toys near the beginning, don't they? Or they always put it somewhere, right? And you've got a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old that's going, Dad, 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 look at this toy. I want this toy. I want this toy. And what do we tend to do? Shut up. I'm busy. Let's go.
Yeah.
Right? Which is what we do with our emotions. We go, shut up. I'm busy. I've got to get on. Right? But what does the child get? Dad, 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 Mom, 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 Mom. And what we're actually doing is when we're saying, I see you. I see you. That looks amazing. But at this moment in time, we can't do that. But how would you like to help me? How would you like to help me do the shopping? They don't want the toy. What they want is connection.
Mm.
And so what we teach when we shout and we do that is we shout, we show disconnection, and they create a pattern of behavior of where they internalize that and go, I better not do that again because I'll get hurt and I want to survive. So the body creates a record of that, creates a feeling, and then
Mm.
when that happens in the future, when they get disconnected, they then start to learn to be compliant. Now, of course, that's there for a good reason, because if we were in, caveman,
Marcus,
yeah,
but it's a kind of living in the past.
but there is no such thing as the past as far as the mind is concerned.
Exactly.
Does
But
that make
that's
sense?
the way what we do that. We do
Yeah,
it, but we don't even know we do it.
exactly. Yes. And this is why bringing awareness to the feeling, not necessarily the story, is the first thing. So the environment, you've got to set the environment firstly to say, whatever I am experiencing, that is okay. Another great word to use is I give myself permission to feel this feeling.
Mm. Yeah.
Because all of those stories is the ego mind trying to find out why this is happening, to give you some data and some information to keep you alive.
Yeah.
That's literally what it's doing. But you need to be able to control the mind, and you need to be able to want to say, okay, I see you, I get it. It's a little bit like a bouncer in a nightclub.
Yeah.
You have a VIP guest that's coming in, right? You haven't told the bouncer. It's your nightclub. You haven't told the bouncer. They're not on the list. And the bouncer's there going, "You're not on the list. You're not coming in.
Yeah.
You're not on the list. You're not coming in." You need to come out to the bouncer and go, "It's okay. I know who this person is. They're on my list. They're a VIP. They're coming in." Right?
Yeah.
But we don't, because we learn when we're younger that we need to rely on others. And this is the same with relationships. So when we start to look at the man's role in a relationship, and I find this a lot, especially when I work with females who are kind of senior executives. One of the questions that I always ask is, are you the CEO at home? I tell my husband this all the time. I tell him to do this. I tell him to do that. And he shuts off and he won't do as he's told. And the reason for that is that business is a masculine environment. And so you have to kind of show up with a masculine energy. And it's energy, it's not penises and vaginas. Okay, but women
Yeah.
tend to rest in feminine energy, whereas men tend to rest in masculine energy. But what's interesting is that for a man to truly rest in his masculine, the female needs to be truly in her feminine.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to, if we go back to caveman times, if you actually look at that dynamic of the man would go out with his spear hunting, and that he might be out for 3 days. And he'll come back and he'll drop the carcass off, and he's tired.
Yeah.
So the woman would provide him with food. She'd cut it up, and while she's making the meal, while she's making him a new jacket out of the hide, he's still alert. he's still protecting the tribe because there's another man that's going to come in and might want to mate with her. And we can't get away from the biology and history, is that it's only in the past few thousand years that we started to create civilization and rules. For most of
Yeah.
humanity, we've been no different to animals. And that aspect of it is still, it's still held in our amygdala, it's still held in our bodies, and
Yeah.
we can't deny it. No, it's not to say that you should be animalistic and that women should stay at home and do the cooking and men. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. It's being aware of where does my energy sit,
Yeah.
where am I, and so when we know there's enough statistics out there that when you have a family where there is a mother and a father that have balanced roles, that children generally grow up and they do well.
Mm.
We also
With,
know,
without mental health issues,
yeah,
you mean?
without mental health issues, generally everything's okay. We know that the vast majority of people who go through trauma, it's because of relationship issues, because our parents set the rules,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and so this is why we've got to be really mindful to understand. And as I say, if we go back to therapy, 80% of people that are in therapy, as
Yeah.
in working in therapy, are female. So they're obviously going to lean more towards the way in which women would think and women would act, which is all about talking. It's all about that sort of connection. And that doesn't mean that as men we shouldn't need to talk, but we need to be able to have the permission to do. Men normally will heal through doing, through purpose,
Mm.
And so this is this is a really, I want to share this story because it's very, very interesting. I'd love your feedback on this, just to see if you were in this
Please go on.
situation,
Yeah.
whether you'd go, actually, yes. Okay, and why this is more action orientated. So a few years ago, things in my business were quite tough, and I wasn't sleeping very well. And I woke up, and my wife said to me, she'd just come out of the shower, and she said, "Are you okay?" Now, that's perfectly reasonable thing to ask. Are you?
Mm.
She saw that I wasn't in a good place, and she asked whether I was okay. This is what I heard.
Mm.
"I've got a really busy day today. I can't be putting up with this shit. Tell me you're okay, and then I can get on with my day." That's what I heard in my head.
Mm. Yeah.
And I flipped, and it all came out. Anyway, she went out. I went upstairs. We were in our old house, and I went upstairs, and I just kind of started to do what I just said. I'm completely safe. My mind and body is just trying to help me. That's okay. Da 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 da. So I was just feeling into the feeling, just allowing the experience. Although it was horrible and it was dark, I was feeling shame, judgment, guilt. I was feeling all of those emotions. And this one word kept coming up, and it was need. Just like need, need, need. And I was kind
Mm.
of observing this experience of this word need just flying around and going, okay, what does that
Mm.
mean? And all of a sudden, bing. So I went downstairs, apologized, and I said, would it be okay? So I have a technique called carefrontational conversation. So I said, listen, I love that you care about me. I love the fact that you were trying to help, and reflecting on what just happened upstairs a minute ago, the stuff going on. And I shouldn't have done that. But here's the thing: when you asked me, "Are you okay?" I felt emasculated. I felt as though I shouldn't have been in that place. I felt as though I should be able to provide. I felt like the business should be going well. I didn't feel like you should have to protect me. That's my job.
Mm.
But I said this. I said, if you'd have asked me this question, this is how I would have responded. And I'd be interested to see what your take is on this. I said, if you'd have said, what do you need right now? Hey, you look a bit, down. What do you need right now? I would have said, I just need a hug. I just need to be held. And that makes sense, right? Because we know science shows us that if we hug somebody for over 25 seconds, 20 to 25 seconds, that releases oxytocin, our bonding hormone. I didn't need her to fix anything.
Mm.
I just needed her to hold me so that I knew that I was needed. Because it takes a lot to get into that personal space, right? You're not going
Yeah,
to hug somebody if you don't really like them or you don't need them and they don't
exactly.
need you, right? So all I needed was to feel held. Now, if you notice that, I didn't want to talk about it. The action of just being held was the most important thing.
Mm.
So that's a typical example of actually when it comes to, for any ladies watching this, how many times do you just go up to your husband and give him a hug and say, "I see you"?
Yeah.
Does that resonate? I'm really interested just to hear what you think. Does that resonate? If you were in that situation, would
I wouldn't come up with a hug, you know? If
okay,
my wife would ask me, I would say, I don't know what I need. And I would probably, 30 minutes later, I would figure out I just want to say something, but I think that I need to be seen. And this kind of, you know, hugging, passing by and just touching each other and hugging sometimes, it's very important to have this connection.
mm,
Sometimes I just don't know what I miss. And often it's a connection. I don't feel seen. I don't feel the connection in my body.
mm,
Like you have everything you wanted. I've always wanted to have family. I have wonderful family and everything's going well. But sometimes there is this strange feeling and I miss the connection.
yeah,
But if you ask me right now, I wouldn't know what to say. Sometimes my wife asked me sometimes, what are you feeling? And I don't know.
yeah, that's too far, right? So this is why this is a power word. So let me just give you this one. Whatever. So somebody asked that, what do you need right now?
Yeah,
Okay, and you don't know.
yeah,
If I was to just say to you, okay, that's okay. Feel that feeling. It's okay not to know what you need right now.
yeah,
Can I give you a really this is quite funny, but you'll never forget it. I
yeah.
always say it's a
Go
little
on.
bit like having constipation, like you can't go to the toilet.
Yeah,
If you notice that when you're constipated, right, you go,
yeah,
but if you think about that, like anatomically, you're squeezing all your muscles and you're making the hole that it's supposed to come through even
yeah.
smaller. But notice that if you've got that really bad constipation, at the moment that you're forced to just relax, the shit falls out, right?
Mm,
And
yeah,
that okay moment is just going, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Don't try and fix it. Don't try and do anything with it, but just feel it. And that's why I'm a massive fan of Carl Jung. A lot of our psychology is based on Sigmund Freud.
mm-hmm,
Um, and the analogy that I use here is that we tend to see mental health as black and white, good and bad.
mm,
Okay. But if we fall into the darkness, if we start to understand the darkness, if we go into the depth of darkness, we know that black is made up of all of the colors. So
mm,
why just have white? Why just have light when you can have all the colors of the rainbow?
yeah,
And this is why if we look at the human race is basically the most successful virus in the world. Okay, our only
yeah,
principal job is to stay alive, have sex, and procreate. That's it. So it makes no sense that the mind and the body would come up with things that are trying to kill us. Like evolutionarily, it makes no sense.
yeah,
What does make sense, though, is that if something is attacking that sense of survival, we will have warning signals, and those warning signals are feelings.
yeah,
The only thing is that we've been taught that there's something wrong. We've been hypnotized and programmed that there's something wrong with us.
yeah,
Why? Well, without being too cynical here, if I can keep you in enough pain, I can sell you stuff.
Yeah.
Whether that be, you know, the latest car, whether that be the latest telephone, whether that be a drug, whether that be whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Why would we drink something like Coca-Cola when it's full of sugar and toxins? Like
Yeah.
Red Bull is a perfect example, right? Red Bull half caffeine, half sugar, but you don't buy Red Bull being half caffeine, half sugar. You buy it because they tell you it gives you wings. They kind of
Yeah.
market it as though it's some sort of health product, and it's not. So I think the biggest challenge I think we've got in this space is number one, you've got to take responsibility for your own feelings, but nobody teaches people how to do that anymore because the system has been created to keep you in pain so that people can profit off it. Like
Yeah.
if you're a free person and you understand, like I can tell you now, are there times when I just can't do it anymore and don't want to be here anymore? Like suicidal ideation, you might call it. Do I still have that? Yes. Okay.
Mm.
But notice I'm smiling as I'm saying it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
my relationship with that thought is, oh, something is happening in my environment that I've not paid attention to. And this is a warning signal. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean into that. Okay. What is that feeling telling me? What is that situation telling me? What's happening at the moment that's bringing that up? And how can I move or shift away from it? How can I create boundaries? And again, one of the biggest problems is that once that dorsal prefrontal cortex shuts down, that's our communication module. Then the hardest thing is we feel these feelings, but like you said, you can't express it, you can't communicate it.
Yeah.
But being still with the pain, being still with it allows it to unfold.
But it means that you somehow got rid of this nervous system response.
I didn't get rid of it. I think what I did is I learned to understand it because it's always going to be there because it's part of your protection mechanism, right? It's like an
Okay.
airbag in a car. I'm not gonna turn the airbag off in my car just in case I need it, right? Because I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm gonna have a crash. So the airbag
Exactly.
is still on. All I'm starting to understand is that when the lights come on the dashboard, I
Yeah.
start to understand what the lights mean.
Mm.
So let me give you an example. Have you got a tire pressure sensor on your
Yeah. Yeah.
car wheels? Right. Have you ever had your tire pressure sensor come on and you check your tire pressures and they're okay?
It happened. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And why did it happen? Normally it's cold, normally the
Yeah.
environment changed or something like that, right? But if you were every time that came off you didn't check them, you don't know whether it's just a malfunction or whether you're actually your tires are going down. And
Exactly.
what we tend to do is as we feel those feelings enough, we ignore them, we put a bit of tape over them, and then the car starts to veer to the left, but we've forgotten that it's the tire that's going down because we've taped over the light,
Yeah.
right? So now we go to a therapist and we go, okay, I'm really, really struggling. My car's moving over here, and the therapist comes in for an hour and holds the steering wheel for you. And then once your time's up, they go, and then you're left with that struggling again. So
Mhm.
part of the work that I do is number one, saying, listen, looks like you're getting a flat tire.
Yeah.
Let's pull
But
over.
Marcus,
Yeah.
Marcus, does it mean that you search for a reason? So what
I'm
is the
looking
cause?
yeah, I'm looking for the root cause of that feeling because I, I know some information already.
Yeah.
Okay. But if what I know isn't resolving the problem, then there's something else. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So if I go back to the tire analogy, okay, um, I test my tire pressure and it's fine, but the light keeps coming on. So what am I going to do? I'm going to get my little computer, plug it into the engine management system, which is the mind, and it's going
Yeah.
to tell me, oh, you've got a faulty sensor. Or it might say, oh, the sensor's okay, but actually it's the wire that goes from the sensor to the ECU. Or it
Mhm.
might be, oh, there's a fault on the ECU.
Yeah.
Now, for the vast majority of people, they're not going to have the skills and knowledge to understand the depths of the electronics of a car. They might understand how to blow a tire up or change a wheel, and that's where we come in. That's the whole point. Is we're looking to say, let's not look at fixing the result. Let's look at fixing the cause,
Yeah.
and that's the big difference about this work. Is it's about understanding why you feel the way you do, where that came from, and then giving you the informed choice of how you change your environment, understanding how your mind works so you can communicate with it better. um, Again, looking at why you feel the way you do and what you need, not what you want,
Yeah.
because often we look external. I want this, I want that, I want the other, but a
Yeah.
need is something internal. And so when it comes to things like relationships, before you can connect with somebody else, you need to connect with yourself. When you know who you truly are, and Marissa Peer says this, she says, I am enough. I am
Yeah.
enough is that phrase. Interestingly, if we look at this from a Christian perspective, by the way, if you go into the Old Testament on Mount Sinai, when God reveals himself to Moses, he says, I am that I am.
Mm.
So I am is very, very powerful. Whatever comes after I am, I have, it's you encode that into your body.
Yeah.
Which is why one of
Identity.
the, yeah, identity, which is why using neutral words like the, so instead of saying I have anxiety, I am experiencing the anxiety. It is not
Mm.
me, it is
Another part of
energy
me.
that's
Yeah.
passing through. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? And so my I think that my top tip, I think, to any men that are listening to this is number one, you've got to take radical responsibility for understanding what's going on inside.
Mm.
Because when you can heal on the inside, and it doesn't have to be done through talking, it's understanding why you feel the way you do. All of a sudden, you become a much more powerful man because you can walk through that darkness and you're not denying the darkness. You start to understand it, you start to utilize it. Um, but
Marcus,
yeah,
I think um, I think it's very important to understand that there is a root cause
yes,
because nobody is telling you that there is a cause for everything.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Every leaf on every tree started as a single seed,
Yeah.
and I think nature tells us so much, and we are part of nature. And so if you plant a seed in soil that isn't great, the environment, then
Yeah.
you're not gonna grow great fruit, right?
Yeah.
um, and you can try. Sometimes it can be tough depending on how deep the roots are down. But really, the work that we do is to get that excavator and
Mm-hmm.
replant that tree somewhere else where it's going to be able to flourish a lot better. But you can't do that on your own. If you're a tree, you can't uproot yourself and just move yourself.
Kind of
Sometimes
difficult. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be quite difficult. So you need somebody with the skills and knowledge to do that, and that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I think the main thing for me is I wanted informed choice of the help that I got. And that isn't always there. That isn't always there.
Yeah. Definitely. And most of the time, it's kind of selling drugs,
Yeah,
like it happened in your case.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a pity.
And the main reason for that is that generally we're quite lazy as humans. We want to take the easy route, and it takes courage, it takes strength. And I'm not against drug therapy. Drug therapy can help to set the environment so you can do the work. But like
Yeah.
anything else, you know, if I use that seed analogy, when a seed grows, to get the fruits in the autumn or the fall, it has to go through seasons. and those seasons all have, you know, the wind and rain is going to strengthen the roots and it's going to strengthen the branches. You know, the spring is going to, as we come into spring, that frost goes and things can start to open up, and then we see the beauty of it all. So
Yeah.
life is very much the same. We're always going through seasons, but the important thing is not to stay in the season, because if we stay in winter, in depression, in anxiety, it has a purpose to move us into spring. But if we stay in winter, we'll never actually fully show up as who we're supposed to be. We'll never harvest those fruits in autumn, you know?
No.
And so it's really understanding that we're part of nature, that our minds are not trying to destroy us, they're trying to help us. But sometimes we just need that help from professionals, certainly those that have been through it,
Yeah.
um, to kind of guide people to understand that actually there's nothing wrong. You just need to understand what that root cause is and what's going on.
Actually, there is nothing wrong. It's kind of, funny, but I know I understand what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Marcus, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an interesting talk, and I hope that it's been useful for the listeners.
I'm sure it is. So, to everyone who listened, click the button subscribe and see you next time.